O tēnā koutou, e anaru e te matua, kai au koe.
Ia te kaumanu te kai ka pua e o e ki runga i ngō taha. Kei raro koto e huka ki ngā kāpuni tangata e o e mai rā. A ko wai ngā tangata kua mai i tēnei wā. Ka re ko ngā uri, ngā tūpu, ngā ta whenua, a ka re roki a mātau. No reira, a tēnā rā koutou, a tēnā rā koutou. A tēnā rā koutou, mea tātou tini a itua, a rātou kuhuri a tiki tua. A hako e kapu ate ngā kupu e te ring. E pau e te whenua e kore rātou e hoki mai. Rore ngā mate, haere atu rā. Kia hoki ki a tātou e tau nei. Kia tuku i ngā whakamoemiti ki te wahi ngaro. Ko tēnei te tūmena ko ke whai he tātou te māramatanga mo tēnei hui ngā i rote te mate one. Ki maumahara tātou ki ngā mea mihora katoa. E ho mai e ihoa, hei ara takini ihoa tātou. I ngā rā haere ake nei, kia puta ki te whai ao, ki te ao mārama. Ko ia rā e rongo whakere ki runga tuturu whakamaua ke China, hui e, tā e kia. A kia rano tātou. Kauri ki a koe leo.
Anaru, tēnā koe. Tēnā koe nau tā tātou hui i whakatū whira. He tika ka mihi ki tātou ātua, nā mea katoa no reira tēnā koe. O te rā e te whare, koutou hoki e whakarongo mai ana mā runga Zoom nei, ko tēnei te mihi, mai oha ki a koutou, i roto i tēnei kaupapa whakaharahara. No reira tēnā koutou katoa, mea taku whakapāha, kāre e tae a tīnana tēnei i wainguni a koutou, nā te mate rewha e pāna ki tōku whare, no reira he mihi mai te mātaua maui ki a koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Anaru, and everybody, welcome. This is a bit strange, I know, to be welcoming you from my end of the woods, which is in Napier, in Hawke's Bay. We've been struck by illness, and I'm sure that you are all often in that same situation, and I did not feel it was appropriate to travel up and carry that up to the fine people of Te Arabo. Nō reira, I'm sorry for that. My name is Leo Watson. I am a lawyer specialising in Māori land matters, and Te Tumu Kaituna 14 Trust have asked me to facilitate these various hui. I wanted to welcome you all. There will be some technical issues, just as we're regulating the microphones and making sure we can all hear each other. So just bear with us. I want to thank Fever Pitch for your assistance throughout these hui. If people online are struggling to hear any of the speakers, just do let us know. It's important that we just pause and make sure we get our sound right so that everyone can hear and participate. We've got a number of people online and a number of people in the whare, and we have microphones in the whare for you to be able to come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and then provide your feedback and kōrero to the hui. If we can just go to the first slide, please, Amber, for preliminaries. We obviously have the whakatau and the karakia. I wonder if there's someone there inside the whare that can just assist those in the whare with details as to the wharepaku and where to congregate in the event of an emergency, and then I'll carry on from there.
Yeah, I can handle that. Okay, as you all know, wharepaku are... Is that coming through? Right, that's the first hiccup with the sound today, Leo. Hopefully there are no more. But
I can hear you clearly now, Matua.
And I'm Malcolm Short, the chairman of the trust, and my fellow trustees are here from the far end is Emily Bidwa. Next is Anaru Bidwa. Then Jeff Fletcher, our assistant consultant. Mike Morgan, our communications manager, and our secretary, Murray Petchell, on my right. Following Leo's request there, the wharepaku, as you know, are just out across the way there, through the door up into the dining room there, are the toilets there, and hopefully we've got lunch booked there for when the hui finishes, hopefully between 12 and 1, I told the kitchen, so sometime then we'll be good to go. So thank you for that and welcome to you all. Kia ora, Leo.
Kia ora, Malcolm. Tēnā koe. And just as part of the introductions as well, we've got Unuku Whehort on Zoom, one of the trustees participating no Tāwahi. And we have an apology from Waldo, who wasn't able to make today's hui. So thank you for that. And we've got obviously a number in the whare as well, and looking forward to your feedback. Just in terms of the hui protocols, we are recording this hui and we'll make it available as we have all of the other hui on the website for those who cannot participate, or if you wish to revisit some of the kōrero. And we'll also put this presentation, the Zoom presentation, up on the PowerPoint presentation up on the website as well. So just for those who are participating by Zoom, for this phase, you'll be probably now very familiar with this, but we've just done a little screenshot down below to show what you would be looking at on your screen, and we've circled in red the chat button. So if you just find that on your screen, run your mouse across the bottom, the black line, you'll see participants, and then a little button says chat. If you just click on that, it'll bring up a box next to your screen, and you'll see how you can, down the bottom, add in any kōrero or questions that you may have. We ask that you do that if you want to let me know that you'd like to have a kōrero, and we will make sure that that happens. Amber, can I go to the next slide, please? So just type your question there, and we'll allow you to participate in that way. Can I also ask for those who are in the whare, Amber will be doing a great job to assist me. If there is someone in the whare who was to answer a question or to provide feedback, if you also can make yourself known by raising your hand to Amber, she'll let me know and we'll make sure that you have time to participate. Kia ora, can we go to the next slide? So today's hui, we're going to briefly look at the previous presentations, but spend quite a bit of time on owner feedback and allow you to participate. Those are the two sort of ways in which we're going to introduce the discussion today. And the reason I say that is because we have been conscious that we are now at hui number 7 this year. And a number of you will have heard the presentations previously, and all of you will have had the opportunity to view them online if you wish to. So we don't wish to repeat material, but we do have to find a balance because there are some owners here who have not heard the kōrero previously. So we're going to make a very short summary of what's been discussed previously, but really allow the bulk of the time for owner feedback and kōrero. And we're going to do that in a couple of ways through owner feedback. Firstly, I'm going to summarize some of the themes that I've been hearing as facilitator over the last few months since we started the hui process in February. And also there are those who wish to speak today and make their feelings known. The other part of the hui is to turn to what the next steps might be. And after all of these engagement hui, there is a proposal to have a vote from owners, not at this hui, but a vote by way of postal vote and electronic vote on some of the proposals that are put forward by the trustees. So today's hui would be look at what those resolutions might look like, how the voting processes might look, and get your feedback on that as well. There is also an update that's going to happen around the trustee elections that will be being convened later this year for 3 of the positions that are available. Kia ora, Amber. Now, in previous presentations, we've looked at trustee guiding principles, which I will put up on the slide shortly. We've looked at some proposals for the trustee elections and how those trustees, once elected, might enter into a rotation scheme so that there is a continual process of refreshing your trustees. We've presented proposals around housing opportunities on Te Tumu Kaituna 14 land and put this in the context of what's happening around your land in terms of what they call the Te Tumu development proposal. And then as part of that, we've put forward proposals whereby the ability for the Te Tumu development to be undertaken through that whole area will require use of some of your land for infrastructure corridors. And given that you have got a clear commitment from your trustees not to sell any of your land, the trustees have put forward proposals about taking the most of that opportunity of around the Te Tumu development, but by perhaps obtaining other land in exchange, additional land. Now, those proposals have attracted some real favourable comment from owners and have attracted some controversy and objection from owners, and that's healthy. That's really healthy. So we're going to look at that briefly so that owners who are coming to this hui today for the first time again can get up to speed. But primarily, we want to hear from owners as well about their feedback. Next slide, please. We just put up the guiding principles. Generally speaking, we've got a very good response from owners as to these principles setting a good parameter, a good sense of where the trust should be guided when they make decisions. We added in at the request of the owners this phrase at the top that the guiding principles are for the benefit of Tumu Kaituna 14 owners. And that's been probably a critical theme that I just wanted to spend a moment on. These guiding principles are really important, but the owners wanted to make it crystal clear that your land should not be used for the benefit of others, that the primary focus of all of this activity is for the benefit of the Kaituna 14 owners, and that makes absolute sense. Where some of the owners have raised objections is the suggestion that some of your land might also be available for community purposes. And how can that be benefiting Kaituna 14 owners? So we've heard that carefully. I think it's really a matter of messaging. The proposal has been that if your land is going to be part and parcel of a development, there is a give and take here whereby the opportunities that are available for you to unlock your land in terms of housing and economic opportunities come about, those opportunities come about because of the wider development around your block. So as long as you don't sell any of your land, which has been clear, the proposal has been to allow the use of some of your land by others in order to unlock the enormous opportunities that are available for your owners. If that balance isn't appropriate, owners will let us know. At the end of the day, there's a lot of devil in the detail yet to come. And that is really a lot of work in the years ahead to plan that out. But we've heard that clearly about making this the primary focus is for your TK14 owners. I'll just look at those principles very briefly. Develop the land without selling it, ensuring your history and cultural connection is represented and respected. We're going to pick up on some owner feedback on that number 2, because there's this clear sense from owners. Don't just repeat development that is around our land. Make sure that this development is unique to the mana whenua principles and the mana whenua identity. so that when people come through this land and visit this land and live on this land, it's very clear that it comes from you and is your development, not a repeat of developments that have been happening around you. I think that's been I've found that very helpful feedback during the year. Housing is a critical component of this. We're going to look at what actually opportunities there may exist on the land. Protecting your community spaces and places. That includes the protection of waihi tapu, mahinga kai, the waterways, and then sites available for community use. And that by community use, we're meaning owner use. Communities for employment, education and training, and then a creation of a sustainable income. And that idea really was looking at exchange lands that the council already owned to come into your ownership, which might provide commercial sustainable income in the future to keep all this going. Thank you, Amber. If we can get through the next slide, we're going to ask, just a slide briefly about engagement. You can see the various hui there. As I said, we're up to formal hui number 5 plus 2 workshops. So this is the 7th engagement process that we've gone through with owners, and thank you so much for all those owners who are participating. Amber, thank you. So just capturing some of the owner feedback there. There's been a call to improve trust communication and transparency. So there has been a real effort made this year to improve that, to communicate effectively through different types of media, social media, the website, hui, workshops and the like. And thanks for the owners who have really responded positively to that. Elections of trustees. Some owners sought a full election of trustees immediately, all trustees to resign, and other trustees and other owners were recognising that there was a need to move from the current situation, which is where trustees are there for life, into an election process. So there's been a balance here where the trustees have suggested elections this year, and they're going to happen, and then have put forward a proposal for a rotation of trustees commencing next year. But that has to be subject to you and your approval. So that's one of the votes that will be put to you. But certainly trustee elections are happening this year as well. I've talked about the next one, the concern that the development of the whenua is for the benefit of others and not for owners, and that's not the case. But we can receive your feedback fully on that more today. The visible cultural identity, we've talked about that, and the trustees have really taken that on board, and how to make sure you have your cultural identity absolutely clear through any development that might occur. And then the environmental impacts. I'm not sure if Mr. Flintoff is in the whare or is online, but he has asked time to speak to environmental impacts. And also others have obviously raised this naturally as a concern about climate change. So we've responded to that and put up the environmental reports that have been relied on. But can I just say that as part of any development process, you're at absolute ground zero here, and you'd need to be going through a long process of technical analysis, testing of that analysis and the assumptions, all the way through the planning processes. So at this stage, it's enough to say that the trustees are very aware that the environmental impacts and the likely impact of climate change is at the forefront of their minds. Thank you, Amber. Just a shout out to the team that's behind the scenes in terms of some of the owner engagement processes that we've been doing, online survey, the Facebook website, MailChimp, and your owner questions. So we appreciate your feedback there. Thank you. Next slide, please. So that's a lot of talking from me. I guess I just wanted to introduce briefly the trustee election and rotation proposal, just to remind us that this, quite separate from the development of the land, this is a proposal that trustees feel needs to be brought through your trust deed. So there's two aspects to this. There will be an election held within the next 4 months. Actually, that needs to be corrected there. The papers will be going out in July for 2 new trustees to bring the total number of trustees to 7. And my apologies, I think I might have said 3 positions earlier in my presentation. It's 2 new trustees to bring the total number of trustees up to 7. So those elections can happen now because there are vacancies. Those who are listening, please get out to your whānau, make sure that those who are owners are entitled to stand as nominees and get involved in that election process. We've suggested that candidates provide a 1-page profile to go out with the postal voting packs, and there's going to be an independent scrutiny of the voting by the returning officer, GHA chartered accountants who are independent of the trust. If you can just go back a slide, sorry, that was a bit fast. Go one more up, please. Thank you, just stay there for a minute. And then, of course, the highest polling candidates would go to the Māori Land Court for appointment. So those are those elections to be held this year. But owners, there's a completely separate process that the trustees have proposed through this year called the Trustee Rotation process. And that does require your consent, your approval to amend your trust deed, because it's not in there at the moment. So if you agree, the trust deed would be amended, and then that's got to be amended through the Māori Land Court. And then commencing in 2023, there would be a process whereby the existing trustees would go through a rotation system. And so we're going to just talk about that rotation system now and what it might look like. So that's the next slide, please. So there are 2 aspects to this. This is quite apart from the elections this year. That's separate. This would commence next year if owners approve. So a proposed amendment to the trust order is required, whereby the 7 trustees would serve 4 years. And then every 2 years, starting from next year, you'd have 2 trustee positions coming up for election. All right. So 2 of the trustees would stand down every 2 years. There's a proposal that the criteria to be a trustee would be based on your CV. We've had a lot of discussion about that this year with your owner feedback, showing an ability to contribute to land governance and or financial management and or tikanga Māori. There's a sense there that this is such an important job that there needs to be an ability to show a commitment to those matters so that voters can have a knowledge about you and be making an informed decision. In addition to that, though, this is the bottom paragraph, there was an additional proposal, and we want you to have your say by way of a vote on this, whereby we bring in a system of hapū endorsed seats for 3 of the 7 positions. And hapū endorsed simply means that the 3 constituent hapū of the land are able to meet and greet the nominee and endorse that person or persons, because there is likely to be more than one, to stand. So essentially, you've got hapū seats, 3 of them for the 3 hapū, and then 4 general seats. General meaning available for any owner to stand or a descendant of an owner as a nominee, free of the hapū endorsement process. Now, this process really has attracted a lot of comment, some of it very positive, some queries about how it may work. The trust is trying to find a balance here between making sure that the nominees and the trustees have a link back to the hapū who are representing mana whenua of your land. But there's a balance because also the trustees recognise that there will be a number who can really contribute significantly to the land and to the trust, who may not necessarily have a strong link at the moment back to their hapū. And so finding a balance by having of the 7 seats with that sort of endorsement seems to strike the right note. But we're seeking your feedback on that, obviously. And I think just a mihi tū Paul Maxwell, I think, who suggested that this proposal be separated out so that you could, as owners, vote in favour of the first 3 points, in favour of having a trustee rotation system, but perhaps not in favour of the hapū endorsed program. And I think that's a sensible way forward. Kia ora, Amber. So I'm just going to pause there now because I want to bring in an opportunity for owners to have kōrero and comment. And why I'm pausing at housing is because that sort of leads us into what the future might look like for housing proposals on the land. And a couple of owners in particular have come forward and said, look, we've got people that are able to contribute their expertise around housing planning and feasibility. One of those is Matere Duncan, and we thank Matere for her willingness to provide her knowledge and expertise to the Trust. And at some point, either today if she's there, or certainly in due course, the Trust would welcome her expertise to be contributed to how this might plan out. The other is Karen Stowers, an email from you, Karen, if you're online or at the Hui, whereby you had a contact person who had expertise in this area as well. And you were invited to give a kōrero to the Hui about that, that option, which we found was a really positive proposal. And there may be others in the whare or online as well who wants to talk about this. So this kōrero here is not just about housing. I'm inviting feedback or comment on anything that's been discussed so far. But certainly, Karen, if you're there, this is an opportunity to have a kōrero, and then we can turn to others. Amber, if you can help me with who wants to have a kōrero. After that, we'll carry on with the rest of our discussion about the proposal. I'm just noting there that Karen's not on the whare. So I think in fairness to her, what I'd like to do is just to quickly summarise the kōrero that we got from her. It may be that she has not been able to join the Hui for technical reasons. I'll just bring that up so that people can have a sense of what she had been saying. Just bear with me. So Karen mentioned to the trustees that she had been speaking with a Tāne Brott, who was a consultant that advised Tauranga City Council on building houses on Māori land. And she used the phrase, I think it was really useful, he might be helpful in coming up with a te arawa eccentric plan. That's that sense of having a real cultural identity for the Te Tumu development. He's done many papakainga in the Tauranga Moana area, from Mangatawa through to Ranginui 12. It welcomed services about what he's called an initial dream to engage with owners and the iwi and the trustees, including kaumātua, as to what the dream is to build on their whenua, to complete a feasibility study, including engineering, environmental reports, surveying and the like, looking at financial options. And that includes assistance with budgeting and the like, planning and design, and then through to constructions. Tāne is part of the Tuara group. So I just wanted to table that with owners and appreciate your comment and feedback there, Karen, as to his involvement. Matere Duncan raised a similar series of expertise, and that was really useful. And if we just go to the next slide about housing, Amber, we just note that there is a Te Puni Kōkiri feasibility application that the Trust has made on your behalf to try and get some funding for feasibility. This is very, very early days, but it's important to make that start. The trustees are also going to undertake a survey to establish the housing needs of you as owners. basically asking how many out there might want to come back to the whenua. What types of families have you got in terms of the numbers who might be living in the houses? What types of housing would you be looking for, ranging from your own house that's purchased right through to rental accommodation, with options even for rent to buy, which is a really positive scheme as well. Can we just really reiterate here that the housing would be on your land that is retained and owned by the trust? And when you buy housing and put housing on your land, you essentially get occupation rights for your generation, and increasingly the Māori Land Court is granting that right to pass through your will to the next generation, to know that you have a real security of tenure on that land for your house. And then of course we note the Te Puni Kōkiri feasibility funding, and we're making good inroads, I think, in getting people amongst your own owners who have expertise in this area. A comment, I'm not sure if the people in the whare can see the chat, so I think Georgina, I'll just read out your comment so that we can keep the kōrero going. Georgina Fata says, I would like there to be a commitment to engage our own people, preferably owners, in all aspects of the housing development. Intuitively, I would like to start with an environmental plan taking into account climate change. So there's two aspects there. There's a wish for a preference for owners to be used and employed and engaged, I would imagine, both through the planning stages and right through the construction stages. I think that's very sensible. And secondly, before any development is occurring, a clear understanding of the environmental impacts. And I hear that, and I have indicated that the trustees understand that commitment completely. Trustees, perhaps you'd like to provide some comment on what I've discussed so far, perhaps about the proposals, the housing aspirations, or indeed the trustee election proposals as well. Can I open the floor up to the trustee table? And then Amber, can you just make sure, because it's very hard to see the room from here, if you let me know if there are any owners who would like to kōrero.
Probably firstly from myself there with the housing proposal there, we have had discussions with Kāinga Order, and they have a huge matrix of ideas and proposals that we're still on the outer edges of that. We've not got into the serious discussions, although we have had insight into the assistance with the developments of the Ngāti Whakaue tribal lands development out at Wharenui. That was enabled by an initial funding and assistance there via Kāinga Order. And so we are yet to take up that full discussion as time evolves, but that's the intention as one of the outlines to the housing proposals. Any further questions from the floor, as Leo said, on the housing?
Yeah, I got one.
Ka pai. There's one.
Oh, gosh.
Here she comes.
Kia ora whānau. My name's Patricia Edwards. I applaud you for all your the really hard work that you've all been doing.
Bring the
And
mic down too closer to the mic.
it's encouraging to see how much progress you've made, but I guess immediately my concern would be, how are you going to pay for all of this? with the, I mean, surely a commercial arm of this needs to be considered also. We all need housing, and the, gosh, it just needs to be paid for and bought, and you don't want to sell any land or anything, so how are you going to create a way of paying for all of this?
Okay, I can answer that for you. Kāinga ora in their developments there to produce the housing under the current government schemes, pay for all the infrastructure to set up, that's the roading and communications and the sites.
So it's government money?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why we need to crack on with it while that money is available.
Absolutely.
There are millions available there, but we've got to use it, otherwise we'll lose it.
That's
so
true.
That's one of the points for timing issues. Yes.
So that's a road, but what about, I mean, it's really expensive to build a house these days, and we're talking about multiple houses.
Fund the housing as well, and that's why they need a 20-year term that they get the lease money off the homes, not us, the owners. We only get the lease for the land,
so
not
this
for
is
the building.
Yeah.
And so their payback is, I think it's around 20 years, and then they will return those homes to the trust to manage.
Okay.
That's their payback period.
I'm just a bit concerned about that, that's all. And so I guess...
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity there looking at us now.
And it's
the
encouraging.
Availability of the funding.
Okay.
Right.
It's not as if the government's got a bottomless pit, you know, in terms
True.
of... So I guess creating that infrastructure would need to be done sooner rather than later, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Government's in huge debt as it is currently, so just adding on to that debt that the government carries already is going to make it even harder as time progresses to facilitate those resources, right?
Particularly if there's a change of government next year, this could all get scrubbed.
Well, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Could we just have the speaker's name for the minutes, please? I couldn't hear.
Oh, my name's Patricia Edwards. So I'm
Patricia Edwards.
of the Irihia Bidwa Whānau Trust.
Thank you, Patricia.
My comment, if I may, just to facilitate that question, because I think it goes to the heart of the proposals here around how to pay for it. Malcolm's answer around government funding is absolutely accurate. There is a limit too, of course, because owners are also required to contribute, or the trust like this. And he also mentioned the political limitations. One of the links, I think, between what the trust is seeking to do for both housing and commercial opportunities on your land is tied to the infrastructure corridors and the active reserve proposal. And that's attracted, I think, some criticism from some owners about the use of your land. But that's the other aspect whereby, as I understand it, the proposal to open up the block in terms of the infrastructure corridor will be the link into the funding to unlock the housing and other commercial development opportunities on your land. In other words, rather than selling any of your land, the proposal was to enter into easement and access rights, which provide a continual source of income for the trust. So I think that's an important aspect too, in terms of how this would be financially sustainable. But thank you so much for your question, Kia ora.
Kia ora, Anthony.
Just reading the
Could I just ask you to pause there, please? Sorry about this. None of us online can hear you. So just before anyone starts talking in the whare, if you can make sure you're in front of a microphone, please. Could you start your kōrero again?
I want to talk about the list that you had up there. And one of them was the emergency housing. How are you going to go about doing that? I remember back in the 60s and 70s when there was something like this was run by the Māori Affairs. And you went into a lottery. And what I have against this take is a lot of us who whakapapa to Ngāti Whakaue missed out. A lot of strangers got on there through this ballot. I see the same thing happening up here. A lot of strangers are going to go where you whakapapa to. The only way you're going to do that is prove who you are by giving your whakapapa. Not through kind of order that's run by the government. Too many times when I stayed where Whakatūria is, where my dad and his sisters always had to do what the Pākehā had to say, because they believed that they were always right. I've been through that system. I'm still going through that system. And we're always being pushed to the side. And I'm not talking only about the government of the day. I'm talking about the council as well. Have a look where all Māori are staying. At Ngāpuna, Ford Block, Koutu, Wairati. Huge concentration of Māori still renting. I'm one of them. At a ngongota. Because I know I won't get a whare to the system that these people represent. That's okay. I've done my time. We all got mokapunas that are coming up. What's in it for them? I don't have the answer to that. I only can speak for myself and my family. Thank you.
Kia ora, Tony.
Kia ora.
Thank you very much.
Kia ora, Tony. So I can tell you that, as I understand it, the first criteria of getting anywhere on that land is that you whakapapa to the whenua. And so that's a really good reminder, thank you. There's no way that you would have non-owner whānau living on that whenua unless they can come through a whakapapa line. That's just the basic requirement anyway of the trustees to manage your land. So tēnā koe. And also just want to note that, Tony, you raised a really good point. You're angry and cynical about the government schemes and the council schemes in the past because they have not served Māori well. So I think the reminder there is to tino rangatira over the whole process here, that you as owners are in control of your development. Kia ora. E kōrero anō.
Morena tātou. Ko Matiri Duncan tōku ingoa, and I hail from the whare whānau and tribally connected to Uinuku Kōpako and Ngāti Whakaue. I just wanted to, but we actually reside in Tauranga Moana. I've been to a few of these huis and I've heard a lot of the kōrero, and it's really important that we air those issues amongst ourselves. But there's also what I believe is still a light at the end of the tunnel. I was the one that raised issues, or well, not so much issues, but housing options at the last hui that we had across the way. And it's really important that whānau start thinking about what are some of the houses and what are some of the needs that you have in terms of housing options. Some of you may be ready to build. Some of you may be looking at LTOs, or some of you may be looking at rent to buy. So, you know, those are those kinds of conversations that we need to start considering. Yeah? I just wanted to talk about, because it was briefly raised around the negotiating access and use rights for infrastructure corridor and active reserves. I do understand, I have spoken with Jeff about it, and is that you can actually negotiate with the Tauranga City Council for a long-term lease, and it has happened, so there's no land loss at all. You just need a good negotiator. I do know that it's happened in some Māori land in Tauranga Moana, where they actually have a long-term lease for stormwater. So maybe that's something that could be part of your list of things to start having that conversation with them. But they needed good negotiators to have those conversations with the Tauranga City Council. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Martira. Any further comments from the floor? Otherwise, I'll get Leo to continue. Thank you, Leo. Oh, here we go.
Kia ora. No, we've got
Kia ora.
Kia ora. My name is Tuiera Pita. Just in regards of the housing, do we have to go through that agency, or could we find cheaper avenues to build a house using all those cheap materials and go other avenues? Or must we go with that agency for housing?
Kia ora. The short answer is no, we don't have to. The process at the moment is simply using the agency to get some funding for feasibility. Feasibility means, is it possible? How many houses might you put on there? What's the environmental impact? But as to who you use in terms of development of those houses, that's up to you as owners. And it ties in with a comment from Georgina online about a concern that you might end up just using what the council demand to be the developers. So I think there's a really good theme here today about making sure you're in control of all that. So no, you don't have to proceed with a certain developers. But I guess in some ways you also have to weigh up if there is an agency there prepared to contribute funding under the current political climate, make the most of that where you can, but don't lose your sovereignty over the decision making.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In regards to the rotation voting system, I find it flexible in the way where if we're not happy with the two trustees, we can change them in 2 years' time. I feel that me as a landowner will benefit utilising that voting process. I think it's great for us, yeah. We always get information every hui that we have with all the information that's provided, and it covers everything to the accounts and admin things, and so we get to see those when we go into that flowing once a year land hui meeting that will be fully established after we decide to go with that voting process system in July. And so, yeah, great work. Great work. Thank you. I so appreciate you for your work. Stuff.
Thank you. Kia ora, Mr. Jeffrey Rice.
Te tupuna whare, e rau ngā te tupuna manaki, e tū mai nei. Te poare mā, ka nui te mihi atu. Te uri, ngā mihi ki a koutou, e oku whanaunga. Shouldn't be any manuhiri in here other than over there and a few at the back, eh? But I've got so much going on in my head about this. For me, though, I try to simplify it. Do we want housing, yes or no? Do we want to utilise our whenua, yes or no? It becomes the how, the who, and absolutely the when. And we need to be sure that we protect what we've got today. And that's why we elect these fellas, to try and take care of that. So if you don't like what's in front of you, dump them. And put some people out there that you think can do the job. But when you decide on who's going to do the job, don't bitch about it afterwards. Too late. Let them get on with it. So, what I want to do is I want to explain to you about some of what's happening out at what I call Pukainga Taru. Pukainga Taru sits inside Rangiuru. And Rangiuru is vast. It goes right up to Matai Road and all the way up Rangiuru Road. And it comes down towards Makatu to meet with Whakaue, ki Makatu. Inside that are several hapū, but two mana whenua sit in there, Ngāti Kuri and Ngāti Marukukere. And we all connect. Ngāti Moko, we all connect. So, Mākino, we all connect, you know, and I mean, I could just go on and on. But it is Te Arawa, is it Te Arawa ki uta, Te Arawa ki tai? Well, it's Te Arawa everyone as far as I'm concerned. So our bloodlines should be enough to get us there. I don't believe we just have to be part of this Ahu Whenua Trust. Our bloodline should get us there. And we should be thinking about designing homes that are going to be there for not my moko, but their moko and my rana forever. But a little bit about what's happening over there. You fellas, well, some of you will know that quayside are there with an industrial development, and if you drive down the new highway, and even from the old highway, you will see that they've started work there already. Millions of tons of soil will be moved and shifted, and there will be an industrial development in that area. We are already in discussions with Western Bay of Plenty District Council, Tauranga City Council, about a new town development that's going to go into that area. It will involve housing, residential. It will build a new town, at least up to 40,000 people. And it will be, well, it started now, probably 20 years away. I hope I'm still here to see its completion. And those are decisions that are going to increase the value of properties, increase the cost of housing, and it's only going to go one way up. So if our committees don't make their move now, then it's just going to keep getting dearer and dearer as we progress towards this. So the sooner we do this, the cheaper it is. Look, I don't care where the money comes from. I don't care if it comes from the devil, as long as we can get it and get on with the job. If Kāinga Ora have got the pūtea, if MHUD have got the pūtea, that's fine. But we need to lock in banks. We need to do lots of things to get the pūtea together, but we'll find it. Look, housing is not just about housing. Housing is a social issue. It's about creating well-being for our people, eh? You know, when you sit inside a warm house, you're a happy person if you're protecting your family and they got plenty of kai. It's crucial we find a way to start resolving some of these issues. And Anthony, you know, Tony, look, you're right. We need housing out of Nongataha, man. Our Okoheriki blocks are undeveloped. So it's not just a problem over there, it's a problem everywhere. So I want you to understand that this town and this development, industrial development, is going to go. It's going to happen. And we should be smart and develop South, what I call to the Pākehā anyway, I call it South Papamoa. If we don't do it, I guarantee someone else will, and we'll miss the boat again. Kia ora.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
How are we going there, Malcolm? Anyone online wish to contribute? Donna, I saw your, Donna Paul, you had your mute off, did you? No. Arthur Flintoff, are you in the house? I think you asked for time to speak.
Tēnā koutou, te tepu mā. Tēnā tātou katoa. Ko Arthur Flinto taku ingo. I represent Rex and Uru Cooper Flintoff Whānau Trust. I take some notes so I don't miss anything. And this being the sort of fifth and final engagement hui, I just want to be sure I have had the been able to share with you another perspective to the issues. I was there about 6 or 7 years ago when they announced the plans to develop the block and sought resolution from the owners at that AGM to change the trust deed and use part of the block to finance infrastructure. The plan came as a surprise and a concern to many of us, including discovering the extent of the sand mining that was happening on the block, and owners reporting they could no longer able to have customary access to kai from the whenua in Tangaroa. It was not so much as a surprise to me. He tohu pārua hau mō te tiaki taia ka mahi tahia hau me nā iwi o Tauranga Moana. And I discovered plans to develop the Te Tumu Kaituna 14 and has been in development for over 14 years before that 2017 AGM. But from the owner's perspective, the plan was disturbing firstly because of the lack of communication. And secondly, because of the profound impact that would have on us and our relationship to our whenua. So for the trustees, your failure to appreciate that and your lack of transparency placed a dark cloud over you. So some of us were concerned about how and what you trustees were doing, and we wanted clarification. Instead, at that time, you railroaded your proposal through a poll that resulted in the bold among us whānau to take action to stop you. Ka nui te aroha ki ngā wahine tō, who took the legal steps to have the voice of many owners heard. There are many questions about what has been happening on our whenua, but two of the most important that has led to this day. The first is, do we proceed with your plan to develop our whenua? And the second is, are we happy with you to continue at the helm? This has really been the purpose of the engagement hui. As you know, I have been involved in every one of these hui. I have been attentive and asked questions that I may establish confidence in you and your plan for our whenua. You have persistently presented your plan and you have been open-minded at the feedback that has been offered. You have invited us to contribute to what we would like to see on our whenua and assured us that all were possible. I heard one owner ask, can I have a house on the block? And Malcolm replied, of course you can. There's an idiom that goes to dangle a carrot in front of someone, which means to offer a positive incentive to a person in exchange for them taking an action they may not be motivated to take. Yes, many things are possible on our whenua, but it may come at an extraordinary cost and with strings. And for that reason, not everyone will be in a position to benefit from your plans. I know this because it is my business to know urban planning, policies, and the ways of the colonialist. You see, Te Tumu Kaituna 14 landlocks two key blocks of prime land that plans to accommodate 35,000 people with lifestyle that includes marinas and moors for their boats that will affect our Kaituna Awa and Makatu estuary. It will be known as Te Tumu Township. It may have our name, but it will nonetheless be gentrification, which means the process whereby the character of an area is changed by wealthy people moving in. The real issue is not about developing our block as it may appear. It is more importantly about an easement on public access roads to these two blocks, because those blocks cannot go ahead without it. You trustees did not know that. And you still fail to grasp the leverage and significance of this. You look at negotiating a deal that involves council offering a piece of flood zone in exchange for the easement, when you in fact could negotiate for the protection of our taonga as a starting point. You have no will or way of knowing the importance of what is before us, because you seek your information from the Pākehā, who place money before people and the environment and dangle a carrot in front of you. Or maybe it is because in 2004, you trustees joined with those neighbouring landowners to form the Te Tumu Landowners Group with the aim of creating a strategy for urban development of that area. Whichever way you look at it, you failed to carry out adequate due diligence that should have included appropriate cultural and climate change impacts and absolute clarity about what will happen to the remaining peninsula. Regarding the urgency to access infrastructure funding that has recently just been talked about, the resource management reforms and the iwi spatial plans for Western Bay of Plenty will ensure funds and resources will be available to mana whenua to achieve their aspirations in their own time. The urgency is how Pākehā work, place urgency on us, and we have made many mistakes out of urgency. We have to take our time and do our process. Pākehā have to let us take our time and do our process to do it. We can't act on urgency. In regards to Resolution 1, and speaking on behalf of our whānau trust, I support the proposal that all trustees be stood down and for the owners to vote for the most suitable team and structure going forward. With all due respect, Malcolm, my dad is also an owner in Pukeroa Orua Whatu Trust, who, as you have stated, have an asset base of $330 million. My dad received $170 kaumātua grant this year. Our people are worth more than that. I just cannot see you taking us where we need to be with a 1960s Maori land trust approach. But there is a role for you trustees in an advisory capacity. I implore you to let the next generation take the helm and finish the opportunity you have started, because the future is theirs. Ko ea taku whakaro, mo enei take kei mua i a tātou. Nō reira, tēnā tātou I whakarungo mai. Uanuku, if you've got any questions, he always asks me questions every time I say something. He's not here. Kia ora.
Kei te pai me mea ka whakautu I tana pātai I tana pātai. Leo. Arthur, yes, very sound challenges for all of us, and not just those sitting in a trustee position, but for all of us. I don't really have a question at the moment, Arthur, but I really like your emphasis on the environmental issues that are at hand, and we've got to make sure that those are looked at appropriately with lots of input before the housing starts. The idea of that many people all around, and ngā mihi ki a koe, Jeff, I have to say personally that I am, one of the things that I'm frightened of is that any development that goes forward means that we won't be able to know when our land starts and when it ends if we're not careful. And it really behoves us to be out of everybody on that tongue of land to be the ones who take the best care when it comes to the environment. The only other thing I'd like to say about housing is that whilst there might be a lot of money available in the short term, the big question is what about ongoing support for people and the sheer expense for people to live in that area. There needs to be some real thinking about how we can leverage things in such a way that not only is the housing suitable for where it will be and will pay due respect to the land itself, but it's that ongoing support of whānau who, for all sorts of reasons, might want to be there a long time, and some might not want to be there for very long at all. They just want to reconnect. Nō reira, koena tāku I tēnei wā, ngā mihi kia koutou katoa, mihi kia koe hoki Georgina, kaha nei ki te tuhi tui ngā whakaaro. Kia kaha tonu. Ai, kia koutou.
Kia ora. So just getting an indication from inside the whare as well and those online. I'm wanting to keep the kōrero going.
Aroha mai, they celebrate a lot in Mexico.
If you can just have your mute on if you're not speaking. Kia ora. So as a facilitator, I'm just hearing you, Arthur, and the the eloquence of that statement. Drilling down, I think the key theme also is actually far broader than the environmental kōrero that you've shared with us at previous hui. I think that you are putting a challenge there, which says that development and aspirations for your whenua should not be responsive to or railroaded by what's happening around the block. And I think that's important to engage with you on and with others, because my question as facilitator is to look at alternatives as well, right? I think you would agree that the current Te Tumu development proposal by the council, including the blocks around you, provides a certain opportunity. It's whether that opportunity, as you said, is such that you end up being compromised in terms of your values and both the environmental, cultural and social integrity of that whole peninsula. So I think it's a really useful, important challenge. I wonder though if we need to do more work and perhaps hear from you more and others about the alternatives that may be available. So I just put that challenge back to you and to others as well, to make sure that the trustees don't end up in a situation where they're doing nothing or doing things very slowly to a point where other owners would rightly criticize them for failing to take opportunities that are available. Is perhaps the key here that if there is an opportunity available, you use your leverage to the absolute maximum and you don't compromise on your own cultural, environmental and social integrity. I think that's the real challenge here. And I welcome your feedback, Arthur, or others on that kōrero. All right. I think what we'll do is, because it's we've been going for a fair time, I want to just make sure we can get through the rest of our kōrero, and I'm not going to go through all of the details which have been presented before. Can I just encourage you, Amber, please, to let me know if there are owners within the whare who wish to kōrero at any stage, and those online, please make sure you let me know as well. Kei te pai. Amber, can I get you to just go down some slides slowly? I'll just tell you when to stop, because a lot of these slides have been seen before. You've seen the overall plan. There's the block, just a little bit slower than you are, please. The culturally visible planning. This is the Te Tumu development proposal that Arthur was mentioning about land to your right. If you just go to the next one, please. This was a slide that came about as a response to one of the questions from an owner about how your block, so let's just look at the boundaries of your block. You can see them there in a sort of a broadly triangle or rhombus structure with the little letters inside. At the moment, that land obviously is vacant except for the sand mining, which is occurring at about where the green letter D is. And it's been shaded in different colors to show different types of land use. The yellow areas headed in with the letters A are showing types of residential housing possibilities. And there's off to the right, you can see approximately 50 hectares of that type of land. Approximately 1,500 dwellings might be possible. But of course, that completely depends on what type of housing process the owners want. It might be more dense or less dense than that. And then there are other types of land use. B is showing the potential for an owner's campground and the like for those who perhaps are overseas or away from the area to come and use the land. The green belt areas are obviously the areas of protection for environmental purposes and cultural purposes. There's a suggestion there at D of approximately 20 hectares for active reserve. And that is, as you say, Arthur, a community reserve. I think Matere has mentioned this. Long-term lease would be the proposal to create a sustainable income. E, showing the purple areas, about 56 hectares potentially of commercial and employment land for owners. And also shaped just off to the left of that, of E, also purple areas, we'll talk about that, is the area where the council would be prepared to negotiate with you additional land into your ownership. So you'd expand the potential for that. So again, and there's a suggestion of a cultural centre or a marae up where F is. We haven't got in there things like health centres and other matters that have been raised in the corridor to date. So I think that might help some of the owners who are questioning how this might look. And of course, that there is completely draft and would be the subject of a whole heap of intensive work to see whether it was possible. My challenge, I suppose, to owners is if broadly speaking, this type of land use is desirable, this mix of land use for the benefit of owners, how do you get there? How do you make that happen? And those sort of opportunities that are available now in negotiation with the council to maximise your leverage is an option that the trustees are putting forward. But I kind of stressed enough, I think, during the year that they're interested in options as well. All right. Can I just go to the next slide, please? Amber, Malcolm, others, if you wish to comment, Anaru, please make sure that you just cut me off and have a kōrero. I know that you will. This is probably the obviously the controversial side of this is looking at the little red lines showing the parts of your block that would be the subject of proposed easements or long-term leases to create that sort of income and to allow those other opportunities to take place. And this is what Arthur is essentially saying. Look, actually, as I heard you, Arthur, be careful, because underneath all that is a Tauranga City Council drive to open up the land to your right. So that's been very clear in terms of owner feedback. And that's the thing I'm grappling with at the moment, is how to make sure that we can hear that kōrero, hear that criticism, but also take advantage of opportunities that are there at the moment. I also just want to reflect on your comment, Arthur, about urgency. And I think that's really important, that you can end up getting under the pump of urgency. Can I just say the whole thing has been slowed down considerably? When I first got involved mid last year, it was all meant to happen by October. Even that was late. And so there's there is a sense here that the trust has got enormous leverage and should go at the pace that suits the trust. Kia ora. So Georgina, you've written a kōrero there. Maybe if you want to just read do you want to come off mute, please, and read your kōrero so that I'm not doing it for you. Georgina Fata, do you want to come off mute?
Morena whānau, ko Georgina Whatahau. I've been engaged in these hui since the outset, and I've only missed one due to a prior engagement that I couldn't get out of. And I'm going to continue to participate and have my say until the final decisions are made. A couple of points I want to make to owners is that, these hui are really, really important, because if you do nothing, you're going to get stuck with something potentially that you don't want. If you do something, at least whatever happens, you can have hand on heart, say to your moko and the generations to come, I did my best. I had my say. So that being said, what the note that Leo refers to is that I was just making the point around how our trust is in the strongest, if you were thinking about this in a commercial sense, commercial position that we will ever be in. And once we unlock the door, that's the point of no return. So that being said, my point here is that we leverage that position to the maximum. So I've been involved in commercial opportunities on other mighty land blocks with companies who have wanted to do similar things on our land, develop it. And we held our position in that if you want to talk to us, you've got to give us money up front. And long story short, we got the money. It was in the millions, and that was just to have the kōrero. And then following that, we added all these other things on top that would compensate us for the loss of that land that our owners would never get back, but for a development that we were going to use the land for. And I'm suggesting that in this instance, that we do exactly the same or something similar. So we asked for an upfront payment, and this might help go towards the concern around how do we pay for all of this. It's not going to pay for all of it, of course, but it will certainly help boost the putea and the money that the trust has access to. And secondly, if we're going to give up land, and this is not a position that I personally have advocated for, but if the owners decide that we are going to agree to use our lands for infrastructure, that we do that in a meaningful and deliberate way. And when I say that, I mean, if I'm going to go into that area of Papamoa and never be able to have access to that land and feel proud that it's still in our ownership, well, then I'm going to ask for something that's going to at least help me get past that loss. And that could be in the form of a long-term lease, and that lease payment is reviewed annually. So not only do we get a contribution or a payment just to talk to us, we get an annual payment for the loss of that land. And on top of that, and I'm just pulling from what has already been put in front of us. And on top of that, we get some land somewhere else from which we can make a commercial return. So it's about, if we can't have the land, we at least try and get some putea that will help pay for the things that we want to do for our owners to give back to them for that loss. I think that was my point. Thanks, Leo. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Georgina. Thank you. Yes, you've been very clear that this is not your favoured approach, but I think that if it does happen and if it was supported, the idea of compensation fully is absolutely important, and that might be upfront monetary compensation, ongoing lease money, and also what we've proposed is an idea around additional land. So thank you for that. Can I just go to that issue then, the additional land question? I'm just checking, Amber, if you'll let me know if there's anyone in the whare who wishes to kōrero. I don't want to rush anybody, so it's just trying to find the right balance for you all. I know we're almost at 11:30. If I carry on. If you just go down a slide, please, Amber. Again, for many of you, you'll have seen this previously, so just go slowly, Amber, but I'll ask you to go to the next slide after this. The infrastructure corridors, the proposal down the bottom there is access and use rights rather than any sale. And your point, Georgina, is once you open that doorway, it's you're going down a certain track. Make sure you maximize your leverage to the absolute nth degree in terms of compensation. And we certainly hear that. If you just go to the next slide, Amber. So that slide shows your block in yellow, and off to the grey area to the left is the land holdings that have been the subject land, we call them an exchange of interest. If you were going to agree to a community use for, say, your active reserve in your block, how might that be compensated? Well, you'd get financial compensation, but the idea is that the council might increase your land holdings by transferring the grey areas into your land. And it's, if you go to the next slide, please, it's fairly good land because I think this opportunity is quite unique for you guys. You'll see that it's situated around the proposed interchange that comes off the motorway into the Papamoa community. Now that's simply indicating that, look, how might you be adequately compensated for anything that you might grant by way of access and use rights? And that's one option, is in addition to financial compensation, there may be land that comes into your ownership. And that's the sort of point that I've been trying to make for you as owners, as a facilitator. This is a huge opportunity. Are there alternatives if you turn your back on that opportunity? And that's not to say that you have to compromise or you have to sell your soul. But I think that it does require the trustees to look really seriously at this opportunity to get additional land that is so well situated in a commercial sense and could provide a real sustainable income through for owners. Can I go to the next slide? I won't go through this in detail. I've talked about it previously. How would compensation valuation work? There's just so much yet to do. And all the trustees are asking is for an indication from owners that they're authorised to enter into these negotiations with the Tauranga City Council, because they would need to come back to the owners over any draft agreement. And then it would have to go to the Māori Land Court. So there's a lot of water to go under the proverbial yet. Can I go to the next slide, please? So this is the next topic. So before I go to this topic, which is our topic around voting on resolutions, I'm just going to pause and make sure that we've got everyone comfortable to go to the next topic. So inside the whare, koe te pai koutou, and online, if there are those who wish to make a comment at all.
Tēnā koe, Leo. If we could go back 2 slides, please, to the where the off-ramp comes off the motorway. I just want people to think about, if you're one of those who look forward to being able to live on the block, or even just to gain access to the block to enjoy the place and walk around where our tupuna walked around. It's really difficult to get there. And I know it's sometimes because there's a key that shuts the gate, but this interchange here is going to mean that the access to the block is so much better. I understand that, of course, that's what everybody's thinking to the east of us is thinking. But even for our own purposes, if you were to have a house there in the future, which would be the best way that you could get home or leave home? And so I want people to start thinking about what the opportunities of having some property right next to this interchange, which would be the access really to the block itself. I understand that it's also going to be access for a whole lot of other people, but just on a personal level, for each and every one of us, this will be the fastest way to get to the block. If you've gone down Bell Road, you know that's a long undertaking to get to the block. And if you go through the Boulevard and other areas through Papamoa, it just seems to go on forever before you get there. So, and the idea that even just on, and there's one last thing I wanted to say about the interchange here. Well, I had a concern expressed by Karen Stowers about who owned that block in the past. We just doing what the Pākehā do in a roundabout way by starting to invade other people's territory. Just to assure you is that from the Papamoa domain all the way back to Otane Wanuku was the Papamoa number 3 block, which was granted to Te Arawa. Now, not specifically to the 3 hapū, but more at a whānau level. And out of that entire block, there's only one down on the very bottom end of the block, which belongs still to the Waratini Watu and them. That's the only thing left. All the other land was sold, not confiscated, nor did it belong to people who weren't from Te Arawa. So in some small way, we may be regaining a little bit more Te Arawa territory and bringing it back in, just if that helps. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, useful kōrero. Thank you, Unuku. So I'm looking around again. I'm going to move to the final topic for our hui. We have got the cooks are going to provide sustenance at midday. So I'm going to conclude our hui just before then. So that gives us 20 minutes or so to receive further feedback from owners. Georgina, you go now, and you want a final kōrero?
Just on the housing, and I haven't seen anything in the minutes, so I could have missed it, but I have on a couple of occasions previously asked for some engagement with our neighbours, particularly the ones in the front of our block, the Maidalene owners. And I haven't seen anything come through for that. And I have asked informally of the trustees of one of those blocks, and they're feeding back that they haven't been contacted. But look, this is just what I've been told. You might have trustees made that contact. So my question here is how much work has been done on connecting with our whānau neighbours, and how much do we understand what their desires and wants are for their whenua?
Kia ora. So I'm going to ask one of the trustees to answer that. I did hear your query there over the hui, and that has come back to the trustees for feedback. And I do understand that there has been engagement, although one of the answers that was given was that the focus of this program is on you as owners for TK14, because they have to decide what they want to do themselves. Is there someone there at the trustee table who wants to respond to that issue?
Jeff, have you got the guts of that? Yeah.
Kia ora, Leo. There have been discussions over the last probably 10 years with the other land blocks, not regular discussions, but they have been, they're aware of the korero in front of you and of the planning. And in addition to that, the Tumu Kaituna, the Tauranga City Council have been in discussions with them through the structure planning that was done several years ago. So they are aware of the plans that you've seen in front of you. The trustees have met with them several years ago and explained to them what is going on and what the activity is with the planning. In addition to that, both the chairs of both those trusts have contact details for Malcolm and myself, and they know they can call us if they've got any questions, any concerns. So the engagement has been on a number of levels, both with Tauranga City Council and with the trustees in your trust.
Thank you, Jeff.
Kia ora. I couldn't see who was speaking. Was that the consultant? Who just answered then?
That was Jeff Fletcher, the consultant to the trust.
Okay, Thank you. Okay, Jeff, that didn't answer my question. So that's not very whanaunga based. What my questions and previously and today was based around how are we talking with our whānau, our wider whanaunga, around these developments, because whilst I might be in one particular block, it's quite small, what we do will impact on them. And I'm not interested in conversations that happened 10 years ago, to be quite frank. And it sounds to me, the short answer is that really no particular effort has been made more recently to connect with our whānau next door. And that's unacceptable to me. So I'm putting it to the trustees that you do something about bringing our whānau into our kōrero. I appreciate this hui here is for Te Tumu Kaituna 14, but we are still whānau and they are our neighbours. At least connect and have the kōrero is all I'm asking.
Kia ora, Georgina. I'm hearing that clearly. Thank you. That's duly noted. All right. I'm going to ask Amber if you can go to the slide, please, about the next phases of trustee voting, owner voting. Yeah, just there. So there's two issues to talk with you, whānau, about now as we head towards the close of our hui. Firstly, what is the process for voting? And secondly, what are we going to be voting on? The process for voting is that would be one vote for each registered owner. And so you're an ahu whenua trust, so that's very standard. Please note that your whānau trusts equals one vote. So a whānau trustee who exercises their whānau trust right to vote will be counted on that basis. We just noted that under the second bullet point there, voting by the number of shares will also be recorded, because the Māori Land Court uses this as a gauge to identify the level of support. And this is because the Māori Land Court has an obligation to make sure that there is a balance between large shareholders perhaps swaying a vote one way, or the other way can often happen, in my experience, a number of minor shareholders sway a vote in a particular way. So at the end of the day, it's one owner, one vote. But with an understanding of, for the Māori Land Court, how does that fit in terms of the broad level of support across the shareholding? An independent trust, the independent returning officer, will be appointed for this process. We're going to send out postal votes, so they won't be voted at a hui. So that gets the broadest reach of owners who are involved. And then when you get your postal vote, and it can also be provided to you electronically by email, you can submit your vote either by sending your vote back in the post or by sending it electronically. And we've added in a process whereby there will be boxes available for your physical voting form to be placed back at the trust offices, because one of the feedback we got last time was that for some of the kaumātua in particular, that would be their preference. So essentially you get an email or a post voting form and you get it back in the normal way. That's going to be kicked off shortly, and I just want to talk now about what that voting form might consist of and ask for your feedback. If we can go to the next slide. There's two key topics. Topic number one is the trustee resolution issue. So just before I get into this, stressing again that the elections for two positions this year will happen regardless of this. It's going to happen regardless. This is about what might start next year. So the resolution that the trust applies to the Māori Land Court for an amendment to your trust order to allow for new rules for a trustee rotation and election system. So 7 trustees would hold office for 4 years each. An election for 2 trustee positions every 2 years from 2023. Noting that existing trustees who stand down would still be eligible to stand again and be voted back on. Trustee eligibility, we've talked about that previously in the hui with some sort of CV. And then a second part of that resolution, which is separate, would be that 3 of the 7 trustee positions be hapū endorsed seats. So the nominee must demonstrate they've obtained some written endorsement from the relevant hapū authority or a recognised hapū kaumātua. That would be a separate resolution, so that you could vote for one and not the other, or you could vote for both and the like. So that's the proposed sort of broad text of the resolution on trustee elections. The second slide will show, if we can, Amber, the other topic. And I take ownership of drafting this. I've tried to draft it in a way that it is honest as possible, but also allowing room to come back to the owners. That in order to facilitate the development of Te Tumu Kaituna 14 land, in accordance with the trustee guiding principles, that the trustees are authorised by the owners to negotiate with the Tauranga City Council the granting of those access and use rights we've talked about to parts of the land shown as infrastructure corridors and active reserve, and how that might be through easements or long-term leases. But it's on the basis that you act in accordance with the guiding principles, that you're prohibited from selling any part of the land, that you obtain best value compensation for those rights, including additional ownership of land, so those are the bits by the exchange, and that the trustees return to owners with full details of any negotiated agreement for consultation before final agreement. And that's the proposed text for the resolutions out to the owners. There's one last slide, so I'm not closing off Kōrero, but just to finish off as to what the next steps might be. Can you go to that, please, Amber? We would ask for the feedback, of course. We're looking at postal voting through July and August. There's also July commences the trustee elections, of course. And then depending on whether the owners support this type of proposal, there would have to be further negotiations, further reports and work coming back to the owners for consultation. And of course, at some point, Māori Land Court applications as well. So there's a lot of work ahead involving both the trustees and the owners. Okay, opening up the floor again to Kōrero, please, on anything you'd like to contribute.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Leo.
Georgina.
Kia ora e te whānau. Peter Edwards, brother of Patricia, Irahia Bidwa Whānau Trust. I've got something's just not sitting right with me at the moment, just with the exchange of land, this piece near the expressway. I lived there at Papamoa for 17 years, built a home at Karakia Parade, just a stone throw away from the boundary of Te Tumu Kaituna 14. And I remember all of that land, it was a shanty town then, and I'm talking 1979 through 1993, whilst I was there, and more. Anyway, coming back to this exchange, this like for like, Peter for Paul, there's some things just not sitting well with me in that I remember that the land as being not usable. It was farmland. There was a lot of swamp. There was no expressway through there. It was all farm. Some of you elders, my age and beyond, you remember the access, the route to Mount Maunganui. So, are we talking dollar for dollar? 55 hectares we're asked to let go of in order to get this show on the road, and I think it's a good thing. Let's do it. But to someone who's offered this land, and what's it good for? Personally, I wouldn't want to live next to the expressway. And the Matua said, it's only a short distance and we drive, but, So can we have some stats on this land? What is it exactly? It looks good on paper, on a plan, but what is it good for? You know, it's going to have history, it's going to have fertility. I've got a funny feeling it was swamp. But I don't know, I've just got to draw back. But anyway, that's all I want to say. Otherwise, I mean, it's full steam ahead. Yeah.
Tēnā koe. So
Kia ora. Peter Edwards.
Briefly answer, Peter. Thank you. So that the short answer is there's a whole heap of due diligence that would have to be done, including all the comments you've raised. So that's really good. This is simply put forward as an option. For instance, if the land didn't stack up as worthwhile, and it's for commercial property, Peter, not for housing, so it's zoned for commercial use. If it didn't stack up as worthwhile, then the sort of negotiations that would just bypass that, and then you're looking at other options, including meeting, upping your financial compensation. So thank you for that, and having people who have lived on the land with knowledge of the land about that sort of thing is really, really useful. So I think just to calm everyone's concerns, what we're talking about here is the start of quite an immensely detailed due diligence process that would have to get underway before anything could be approved. Is there another kōrero there from the floor?
We have been in touch with our neighbours, Te Tumu 7A and 7B, and even with 8B1. So we've always offered an invitation for them to come in and be with us in our trustees meetings. My name is Ko Emere Khan Malak Aho, ko Te Arawa Te Waka, ko Nongotaha me Otawa, me Ranguru nā Maunga, ko Auahau, me Kaituna, me Raparapa Hoi nā Awa, ko Ngāti Rangiwipuhi, ko Waitaha, Tapuika, no Auahau ahau no tēnei taha me Hareki ki Te Puke. And ko Ruby Emerea Media Ngāki Rota tōku whaia. Ko Te Aki Marainui Rota tōku pāpā. No Tarukina, no Te Puke. Ko Wai Aho, that's who I am, and I am very strongly affiliated with this whenua through tōku mama. And it was her who put me onto this trust 32 years ago. She's been in touch with this trust for many, many years, asking what is happening with our whenua at Papamoa. And then we started to come together as a trust, and I've seen all our kaumātua who were trustees in the past who have now gone on, who are ko mati mati. And my heart for this kaupapa is that I'm fully involved with it because of taku whānau, taku mukapunas, me nā mukapuna tuarua. You know, we got to kōrero, and this has been a beautiful hui today because we've all had our say. And Georgina, coming back to you for our other trust, we will follow it up again with our fellow trustees in the other trust. It's always been our goal and aim that we work with both all these trusts together as a team, as a whānau katoa. Because you'll find some of those people in those trusts are also in Te Tumu Kaituna 14. So we're all affiliated one way or the other. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Emily. Anaru, I'm going to pass it to you shortly just to maybe provide your summary and your thinking of what's happened today and to close our hui. But just before you do that, making sure that those online or those... Oh, we've got another speaker to come. I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Kia ora, Lorraine Galvin. I've got a question again, this postal voting sort of sticks in my craw. How many people do you know addresses for that are notified? You know, I mean, I heard that we had 5,000 owners. So how many addresses do we actually have to let everybody know? I mean, looking at the small amount of people here, we're talking 5,000, you know. Does everybody know? Not everybody's online. Not a lot of people know how to get on Facebook. So my question really is, how many addresses do we have? Can we not do it the old way? We can do it the new way, but for the ones that don't have internet, all those sorts of things, how many addresses, please? I'm curious to know what the Trust has done for notifying our people, because there's a lot of people missing. And that's my question, is how many people have we got addresses for, considering we got 5,000 owners?
Approximately 1,500.
1,500?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, it shows that I think we have all got to go and do some work and let our whānau know what's happening, because 1,500 to 5,000 is a very small amount for voting on. You know, I mean, we've got a big decision to make, and 1,500 is... And then, like you said, the Māori Land Court will go by the shares, which makes another big difference. So that's my question, is really, have the Trust bothered to go out and find a lot of the owners, or are they just sitting back waiting for the owners to come to them? I know years ago, Ngāti Whakaue sent out people to do research to find owners. But, you know, a lot of these trusts aren't doing that anymore. They're expecting people to come to them. A lot of our oldies don't do it. They can't even get there, let alone trying to hop online. So, as I say, you trustees, I think that's part of your job too, is to find out who the rest of our owners are, find addresses. You can match them up online, or surely these office girls can, you know, use a bit of creativity and look at the amount of shares. Possibly that's that whānau, you know, and stretch it from there. But I think 1,500 to 5,000 is a big difference.
Hilda, thank you for your comments. Well, I certainly have heard that the communication is a constant challenge. Even the 1,500, I imagine there will be some return there as addresses change. So two things to note out of that. Yes, it is part of the trustee's obligation, and that message has been clearly received and continues to reach out to owners. But also you are very wise when you said it's for the whānau themselves also, to get your own whānau engaged. It's a two-way street. So really hearing that kōrero. I must say that in my experience, 1,500 out of 5,000 is actually quite good. I'm not saying it's appropriate or something to celebrate, but in terms of large Māori land trusts, it's certainly better than many, but we can always improve on that. And thank you for that. You did just mention doing it the old way. I guess that's what I just want to comment, that we've been trying to put postal stuff as well as emails, so that the kaumātua don't just have to try and rely on going online. And definitely we can always improve every day with trying to get better addresses.
Okay.
Tēnā koe.
Yeah, thank you. I did get a letter this time. Thank you very much. I was one of those ones who never got a letter the last time. My husband gets one and I don't. Hence my problem with this voting and postal voting. That's my problem, is, you know, there are a lot of people out there who, one will get one and one won't. And we live in the same house.
If you can talk with Amber as well. If you can talk with Amber towards the end of the hui about that, please, so we can get that sorted out for you. All right. Thank you for that, whānau, and thank you for allowing me to facilitate today. And if I can, we got another speaker? Well, this is to be the last speaker, and then I'll hand it over to you, Anuru.
Oh, kia ora. My name's Anuru Paul, from Te Kaungahuro Trust. I've two questions. Can you clarify one vote per trust?
One vote per owner, and if the owners are part of a whānau trust, it's one vote per trust.
So if there was no trust, does that mean each of those people within that trust get a vote?
Yes.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. All right, Anaru, thank you. If you can conclude our hui, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, ko Charlene Oliver Takuinu. I'm just worried about kāinga ora, where they're in with this, because over here in Rotorua, I'm in the Whakapainako block, and our trust has asked the government and kāinga ora if they wanted to lease our Māori land for all the ones Māori, for the housing crisis that's happening here in Rotorua, and they're not, because of the infrastructure. They said the infrastructure was too much, like $500,000, hello, and yet they're coming on to our land in Papamoa. So how come, because they're coming onto Māori land, so obviously they've got a plan and happening. Trustees might know about it, that we don't know, why they're coming onto the Māori land over there when they're not here, where there's a lot of housing crisis. Yeah, and now now the government is buying up the reserves, all Whata Reserve, and I think there's about 10 reserves they're looking at buying. So that's, and that's Māori land too. It should have been given back to the Māoris, but coal. So that's one thing with kāinga ora I don't like. And also the trustee rotation thing, I think it's a good idea. Yes, we do need trustees in there, and the rotation, next year, kei te pai.
Kia ora.
Kia ora no tātou, ko tai ki tua te whakamutinga o tō tātou hui. Before I go there, just like to, it's a brief summary, what you spoke about the land exchange. I recall one of our early meetings when Uanuku shared with us, out of all of those blocks, 70% of it is gone. And whether it's swampland, whether it's high-rise buildings, we want our land back. So that's part of the premise of looking at it, to back up that no lands for sale. Tēnā rā koe, I suppose this has been our job, is to he taringa, to listen to the concerns, inga mahi hea, inga mahi pai, but ki te whakarongo. I take the fact that, yes, that you finished your kōrero, e ko enei aku nei whakaro. These are your thoughts, and those thoughts are important, so is everybody's else. So our job is to take the lot of them, put them in the kete, and then we take what's from it. Again, part and parcel of this, the whole kōrero is about mata hururu karereta manu. It's that the birds need feathers to fly, so it's about us looking at, because we have a belief that our tūpuna left our land here as an economic base for us. That economic base that covers all of those areas, our physical base, our spiritual base, our mental base, everything. So it's about how we utilize our time and space here. Because when we look at it, they left by our tūpuna for us. We in turn are tūpuna for those not yet born. So how do we maintain that? So that's been part and parcel of this whole series of kōrero. So koina taku nei kōrero. Engari, to close it, kei te inua tuki a koe te tuakana a paratene. Mau he kōpani tō tātou hui, mau anō e te mana whenua. I'm just handing it over to the mana whenua to close. Leo.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you for being online.